Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the 20th audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot. My name is SGAnon. It is wonderful to be with you. We have such a fantastic little bit of information session for you all and a little bit of a reflection session that we can listen to and enjoy. We're going to talk a little bit about just everything going on tonight. We have absolutely so much. It's becoming difficult for myself to keep up with everything, to be perfectly honest. We have comms flying every day from 45 at this point. We have Scavino comms every day, some of them a little bit more blatantly obvious than others. We have the Biden DOJ investigating Trump and stepping the rhetoric up with that. We have the J6 committee issuing a subpoena to the former president, current president, and everything that comes off of that. The exposure of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the Federal Bureau of Infiltration, is in full swing. The exposure is it's in the public space in a very big way at this point. We have news reports of U.S. forces in Europe. We have a little bit of credence to that, but not everything is as it seems. And we have some things going on in the underground world that we're going to talk a little bit about and reference. So without further ado, let's kind of get into it tonight, everyone. Tonight's show, we're not actually going to do any of the TruthSocial decodes. Sometimes it's good to step back and have a little bit of a changed perspective. We keep our minds sharp, try to see things just a little bit differently. What I personally term flash changing, which is where you reorient your lens that you're currently using on a particular topic or subject or pursuit, whatever has your emotional and mental attention, and you switch up how you think or feel about it. That's just a personal term I have, is flash changing. It's really helpful to do that as we walk through the no man's land that has been the last 2 years during this war. For those that are, fairly new and excuse me, and coming on board maybe for the first time, or for the first few times, for those that have been coming around to the corruption, the criminality, the things just not making sense over the last 3 to 4 months, we're going to do a quick brief recap for you. The long story short is we have a worldwide mafia syndicate, a worldwide control structure that is entrenched in money, finance, power, government, economics, and law all around the world. This particular mafia has controlled how money is valued and how money is used, replicated, and circulated for many hundreds of years in the world. And so, to quote a gentleman named Meyer Amschel Rothschild, who I would refer all of the newly awakened individuals to go and do a little bit of homework with this particular individual. He's the most recent fork in the Rothschild banking dynasty from about 270 years ago. If I can use his quote, the quote goes, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." And that is actually a fantastic summation of this entire elite Kabbalist power structure that the world is awakening to en masse. They are lawless, they are evil, and they are bent on world domination and forced population reduction, which is a fantastically polite way of saying mass genocide on a global scale. So for those of you who are, first, maybe this year for the first time coming around to things being not what they seem, understand that this power structure that has been, well, let me first say things are not what they seem, and they have not been what they seem. Just about everything that you have learned or been told by the educational system, including graduate, master's, doctoral, and fellowship programs, as well as scientific research and academia and textbooks, things like that, that have been generated over the decades to support certain narratives. The nature of our earth, the nature of politics, the nature of your vote. Most of these have been a lie, or at the very least, an incomplete truth for most of your working and living life. The issue with voting became a very big, fraud became a very big issue in the United States elections back as early as the early 90s. We can go back even further than that, and we can find examples of fraud. Richard Nixon actually conceded a race at some point. The actual date escapes me. I would encourage each of you to go check, but he conceded a race, and I believe it was in Illinois, although I could be wrong, simply because it would have done more damage to the country to have informed Americans that there was systemic level fraud that was outcome determinative going on in those days. Excuse me. So just about everything that we have been told and that we have come to know as quote unquote true, or just the way things are, that's actually not true, or not the way things are. The history that we have been informed of has been written by the victor. The victor throughout the centuries has always been on this rock, or for at least most of mankind's first few modern ages, has all been the evil ones. And so for the first time in human history, we are at a point where the entire, you could call it the corrupt club, for lack of a better term, all around the world is being shown simultaneously for who and what they are. The Trump presidency of 2016 was the beginning of the end for them. For a little bit of clarification, from 2001 began a series of events where deep military intelligence and deep military patriots began outlining the final phases and implementing the final phases for a full worldwide takedown of this evil group. 9/11, 2001, while I have heard the rumors about, it was circulated by white hats and it was done by white hats, etc., I can tell you unequivocally that it was a black hat operation, and it had one main purpose and many side purposes that branched from the main purpose. The main purpose was to prevent the financial system of the world from being changed. There is a law signed by President Bill Clinton at gunpoint by special forces from the United States Army, called the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. This law was buried by the Bush administration, and that burial process was completed with the appointment, confirmation, and seating of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts. John Roberts is, or has been, implicated in an elite child trafficking scheme involving the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, and involving adoption agencies and CPS organizations in the United States. John Roberts is also a Knight of Malta, formerly, now that that particular brotherhood has been dissolved, and a Jesuit. So between the Bush administration of 2000 to 2008, the appointment of several corrupt Supreme Court justices beholden to a deep state agenda between 2004 and 2014, and then the presidency of Hussein Obama from 2008 to 2016. That entire period of time in the United States was not reflective of the will of the people. President Obama cheated his way to victory in 2012, and George W. Bush cheated his way to victory in 2004, 2005. So, excuse me. So, understanding that the will of the people and the direction of the country have been divergent for a very long time, the military was ready as early as 2011 to begin enacting a process to forcefully remove Barack Obama. The military had evidence going all the way back to before 2000, and certainly through the first decade of 2000, to implicate them and their whole group in treason, sedition, crimes against humanity, children, etc. Those things that we have come to know, unfortunately, to be much more true than we wanted to believe. However, that plan was tabled when the military reached out to several patriotic billionaires who had, excuse me, who had celebrity appeal, likability with the people, and obviously were not beholden to other interests. The man who agreed to run for president of the United States was Donald J. Trump. The presidency of Donald J. Trump beginning in 2015 during the campaign and leading through 2016 and then up to 2018 and 2020, that entire period of time was the unfolding of the first large operational phase of a years-long military coup in the United States. The option was to remove the traitors from all levels of government, so including Congress, the bureaucracy in DC, all of the federal agencies, many of the state agencies, many state governments, including governors, the president of the United States at the time, and as well as his entire administration, and approximately 40% of the United States military as well. So the option was to do all of that by force and risk throwing the country and the entire world into a conflict that simply could not keep the lid on, or to do so as quietly and covertly as possible, having the power of the lawful executive of the United States. The NSA monitored the election of 2016. The NSA helped to unrig and ensure that the election of 2016 went to the appropriate and correct winner. That individual, as we all know, was President Donald J. Trump. If you look at the Trump presidency from an outsider's perspective, just with a broad lens, and you examine the actions, documents, and travels, meetings, etc., that occurred during the Trump presidency, what you discover is it was not just an American president who was America first, wanted to put the country first, wanted to, contribute to the rest of the world in an appropriate and meaningful way. You also find out or see that it was an enormous fortification period. The country was made ready for siege under President Trump. The election infrastructure was fortified. The authority of the executive of the United States was leveraged to allow for certain laws to be pre-lifted, altered, or reapplied according to executive order, Article 2 of the United States Constitution, and a litany of U.S. code and case law that allowed for the President of the United States to ensure that the country could withstand the type of cleaning operation which we have been going through for not quite 2 years now, and we are going to enter into a much more public and much more impactful phase of that soon. So the 4 years that President Trump was in office, he met with world leaders, helped to form what we call the Q Alliance or the Q Patriot Alliance. There is a worldwide military operational, there is worldwide operational coordination going on between militaries. I checked a flight radar tracker today and found 10 separate world militaries represented in the airspace above the United States, including a Hungarian aircraft that was within 100 miles of Washington, D.C. If you check those same sort of flight trackers in other countries, you find U.S. National Guard, U.S. Navy, etc., in areas that it almost makes no sense. So there is an operation going on around the entire Earth, coordinated and connected with patriots from all of our countries who have agreed to step in and do the heavy lifting for us to help save humanity. Our job as awakening digital warriors is to take that gift that was given to us, that gift of sight and that gift of protection and safety, even though we may not feel it in the public space because of the mainstream media programming. We're still fighting that MK Ultra programming. We need to appreciate the fact that we have been, for the most part, protected. I understand and I feel for each of you if you have lost individuals from the COVID bioweapon kill shots. I have lost 2 family members from the, one family member and one friend from those kill shots. I have had several other friends maimed. That is unfortunately a price of war that I do not have an explanation for why it has been paid, but I do know that all explanations will come as we go through the second and third phases of this operation and finish the reconstitution period that the citizens of the United States are currently living through. Now, this is conflict. This is the battle for the destiny of the earth. This is the battle for the future of mankind. This is the battle to take back the governments that have wronged you so egregiously. In the United States of America, at least, and in many other countries around the world also, individuals who are known by the vast majority of the general population to not be legitimate have been making decisions and pulling levers of power that have affected you painfully in everyday walks of life. They've affected your work, your school, your personal safety. They have affected your religious rights, your right to worship, to communicate and exchange. They have shuttered your free speech. They have planned your mass murder, and they have assisted in wholesale terrorism and government toppling in other nations as well. This is a disgusting swamp that we are in process of draining and removing. And so with that, I would encourage each of you to appreciate that, the plan was to force us all into lockdowns for 3 to 5 years, and then make the only condition of coming out of lockdown be this forced vaccination campaign. This forced vaccination campaign tied directly into the weaponization of a technology called 5G. 5G in and of itself is a frequency range that can be harmful or helpful depending on who is controlling the emitters and the receivers. The technology itself, as it was designed to be a mass murder weapon, because it was designed to shred your blood cells. The COVID vaccines contained various, or do contain, I should say, various substances that are toxic to the body. Some of those substances can actually be activated and controlled with 5G frequencies and made to behave certain ways. Nanotechnology has also been present in many of those kill shots, especially from Pfizer and Moderna. And so that was yet another angle that this was going to play out towards, a mass depopulation, and those that survived would lose their free will. If you think about it, your thoughts, your ability to think and direct is a neurochemical process that occurs at the pleasure of your spiritual nature, but cannot happen without physical changes in your electrochemical and just chemical transmitter makeup in your body, in your head. And so these shots were designed to help interfere with that and to give them control over those electrochemical processes. They were literally going to hijack your ability to think for yourself. So this worldwide alliance has that President Trump and many other world leaders formed has undertaken the largest task of bringing to justice the teeth of this power structure, while simultaneously informing the entire population of the world and the free peoples of the world just what was going on, what almost happened to them, and how we can move forward from here as civilization. And so I know that that's all very serious, but I want to come back to the reality that we have right now. The reality that we have right now, excuse me, is that President 45 and the commander in chief is walking lighter and freer and faster than ever. He is looking healthy and happy. He is symbolically very strong at all of his rallies. 45 is very well insulated and protected by the military. The United States government, the fake United States government, is continuing its long-term implosion process. We have individuals in the United States government that were planted by our side to be called upon at a particular time when duty called, to play their role and their part, and they've done so. We also have a Judas goat that we implanted in that black hat side, and that on the black hat side of the fence, known as Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris. That administration is designed to cripple the American deep state apparatus and simultaneously show it for what it is to the American people. I would argue with you that a great deal of you are here now because you began experiencing an inordinate and nonsensical amount of pain under Joseph Biden in an extremely rapid period of time. And so because of that sort of rapidness, it causes one to question the programming which we've all been given our entire lives. Our fear-based programming gives way to confusion. Confusion can break through fear because confusion is a very logical process. It engages the part of the brain that is needed to assess critical thinking and cognition and to make evaluated decisions. And so in a way, Joe Biden may go down in history as the worst US president, but one of the greatest things to happen to the awareness of those patriots and citizens in the United States of America who really just want to live their life and be left alone, but they want their votes to count. So all of that being said, that should catch us up a little bit for those that are coming on board over these last few months. I thank you very much for your courage. This is the hardest time to be awakening. We have a large amount of stuff in the public space that we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We have a large amount of stuff in the private space that most of which I'm not privy to, but I'm going to share just a little bit of what I am privy to this evening, and we'll end on an encouraging note. So let's get right to it. The nuclear scare rhetoric has turned up tremendously. We have, excuse me, Russian government agencies and ministries warning the rest of the world that Ukraine is intent on setting off a dirty bomb. Russian intelligence has been following radiation signatures and movements for the entirety of this conflict. They apparently deem it severe enough now to essentially give the rest of the world a PSA. In return, the deep state controlled NATO countries, the NATO governments, and the Western world media are beginning to spin. Well, they're not beginning; they're just continuing, and they're ratcheting up the spin on Russia's intent to use a thermonuclear dirty bomb in Ukraine. And so we sort of have, it's a tit for tat, two 5-year-olds blaming one another for something that one of them is going to do, basically. So much of this is optics for the world, but the scare events are, I don't believe these are optics. I believe that when we evaluate this from a logical point, and we look at the period from 1945 when the atom bomb was completed and then used, the period from then until 1991 when the Soviet Union was toppled by George Soros and essentially the Western banking empires. What we can deduce from that is the nuclear warhead and arsenal the world over became extremely large. The arms race that occurred, especially between the mid 1950s and the mid 1980s, produced some of the worst weapons ever conceived of by this criminal cabal syndicate, and it produced them in great quantities. Just about all of the developed world militaries possess the capability to unleash these weapons. After the Soviet Union fell, a number of these weapons, more than 20 is my understanding, went completely missing, unaccounted for by governments around the world, commerce agencies, and custom agencies. And so when you have nuclear warheads that have gone missing, which we can talk about the science of splitting an atom, this and that and the other. There is a good line of thought that talks about how nuclear bombs are nothing more than just simply extremely powerful conventional warheads, regardless of what their mechanism of destruction is. When you have something this powerful that has gone missing around the entire world, nobody can find it, being held to ransom is now a very real concern. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that the White Hat military operation did not go in and end the Joe Biden presidency on January 22nd, 2021, 2 days after the inauguration, the fake inauguration, was because the deep state players and the apparatus that still existed, parts of the power structure that could not be dealt with until we had a devolution situation in the United States, made very clear overtures that dirty nukes would be set off in large population centers if that move was made. And so we have been fervently, quietly, purposefully, and precisely traveling the world, if you will, through this military alliance, tracking down these threats, neutralizing other threats, and destroying the networking, tunneling, and trafficking systems that essentially are all around the earth, under the oceans, under our countries, under our continents, under our mountain ranges. The situation in Europe, as I have talked a little bit, is going to get worse. I cannot say for certain that a nuclear bomb going off is the scare event or is not the scare event. I can't even tell you for certain if it's going to happen. What I do know is it's important to pay attention to the rhetoric from both sides. It is also important to read between the lines and look where our attention is being diverted away from. And a good example of that is the explosions, the seismic explosions they registered on seismographs that occurred under the Baltic Sea over this past weekend. There is a tunneling system that is deep, deep, deep underground, and it ties from the Baltic Sea into the Baltic states and then down into the far east of Europe, landing in, ironically, the Ukrainian area of the world. There are 37,000 miles of tunnels and deep underground military bases beneath Eastern Europe and that very eastern, southeastern area of the Baltic Sea. Those tunnels are being destroyed by this joint coalition, while Russia is also handling the public-facing issue of removing the Nazis forcefully from Ukraine. Russia is building up a massive invasion force. There's going to be retribution through the country of Ukraine and through the Ukrainian government that was installed by the war crime of 2014 under the Obama administration and the CIA. That government is going to fall. Russia will be providing humanitarian relief and aid to Ukrainian citizens who have fallen victim to their own government. The puppet Zelensky has not been within the borders of Ukraine in months, and has ordered many of his armed forces to shell apartment complexes and hospitals in order to have material which could be blamed upon Russia. These people are sick. Russia has waited 1,000 years for this moment. They are going to go in and clean house. Interestingly enough, Russian military tribunals have now begun in the Donbass region of Ukraine, and those tribunals involve deep state operatives from all around the world with many different nationalities represented. Some of those individuals who will be put on tribunal by the Russian military are contractors of American bioresearch firms and the CIA. These individuals, many of them hold dual citizenships, but the military justice that Russia and the rest of the world in short order will bring to these individuals, the citizenship will simply not help them. Ukraine, Taiwan, other areas of the world, sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia, there are bioweapons laboratories that have been staffed, funded, and directed by American agencies. As patriotic Americans here in the United States, we have always been taught that our government was righteous, as I'm sure many of you out there have also been taught the same thing. Unfortunately, we were all lied to. For the greater part of 50 to 60 years, the American military scientific industry, that complex that exists, has devoted an obscene amount of time, manpower, research, and covering up to arranging to bioweapon development. They've been developing biological weapons of mass destruction. The intent, unfortunately, was to release these weapons on the population of the world beginning in 2017 and then continuing until 2030. The plan was to have Hillary Clinton finish what President 44 here in the United States started. Hillary Clinton's charter was to take the United States into a global nuclear war and to take the United States into a global pandemic that was actually very lethal. A good example of some of the diseases that were going to be released upon the world, which President Putin and the Russian military have neutralized, would include virulent forms of polio and smallpox that had been weaponized for transmissibility, as well as an aerosolized version of the virus that causes rabies, which has a 97.9% fatality rate in humans. This would have been an absolute dystopic situation had the United States military and other militaries in the world not stepped in and taken charge in the way that they did. Russia in Europe is aligning itself with Belarus. Lukashenko and President Putin are of the same mindsets. They are presidents that are for their countries. They are Belarus and Russia first. They're not perfect by any means. There's definitely blemishes on the records. There's some rights violations that have absolutely occurred with both men. But at the end of the day, they are for humanity and they are for transferring fairness back to the free peoples of the world. Belarus will involve itself very soon in this war publicly. I can't confirm this, but my suspicion is that involvement will likely happen around the time that the full-scale Russian ground invasion of the remainder of the Ukrainian countryside begins. The reports you're hearing about the United States deploying light infantry divisions to the Ukrainian countryside without declaring war are unfortunately true. It's not to the level that we've been told, and it's not for the reasons that we've been told. Unfortunately, there are factions, even within the military of the United States, that are loyal in some way to the traitorous Manchurian government. Some of those factions are going to be taken out by the Patriots in the military. An unfortunate scenario is going to take place in several countries around the world where military patriots will be forced to detain and subdue some of their own. There have been units deployed from the United States to Ukraine through Poland. They have gone in with German forces that have staged themselves in the westernmost fields of the Ukrainian countryside. It is my understanding that the Russian defense minister and General Mark Milley, the TV general and the traitorous chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, have spoken several times about the risk of U.S. involvement and the risk of Ukrainian nuclear dirty weapons. It is my belief that General Milley will at some point be implicated in helping Ukraine to either detonate a dirty weapon or conceal and attempt to detonate a dirty weapon. General Milley was taken down. I shouldn't say taken down. General Milley was detained and given a part to play about July of last year, is my understanding. He was removed from command by Marine Corps General David Berger and a platoon of Marine MPs. This happened around the same time that Major General Daniel Hokanson of the National Guard Bureau was also identified as a traitorous asset and given a tropical reservation. The next few weeks that we're going to live through are going to be life-changing and world-changing. They will be clarifying in ways that we never really thought possible. They will be comforting to Anons and Patriots everywhere. They may also be scary, and that's where we have to do our part as digital warriors who have been granted this gift of sight in this period of time to help other patriots who are maybe just stirring to the waking up process, or maybe they're simply just patriotic citizens who are confused and unsure of what's going on and where to find the truth. And they're going to rely on those individuals out there, many of you who are listening to this broadcast and others like it. I still stand behind the statement that I have made regarding the United States Supreme Court and the midterm election of 2022. Just recently, there was a thread that was posted on TruthSocial, which received a direct reply from the TruthSocial account @Q. That reply stated, our patience gets short every year, our attention spans get shorter every year, and that we need to have patience for Red October. That profile also pseudo confirmed or gave us a very strong hint that November will have intense public facing disclosure that we would equate as the drama of something like Red October. A nuclear event would be cause for the fake government of the United States to suspend the electoral process. A nuclear false flag of some sort on U.S. soil would also be cause for that. I cannot, in good conscience, believe that the White Hat Command would allow such a devastating weapon to actually be used. I can also say to each of you that the capabilities for CGI, movie making, and etc. could very well paint a picture that is just flat out not true and didn't happen. And that picture could be used for good or bad, depending on which side of the operation is making it. We have had a couple of, well, we've had a litany of small scale false flags the entire year. I anticipate that we are waiting for a very large national event of some sort, either in the United States or somewhere in Europe or the rest of the world, that directly affects and draws in the United States. We have 6 days left in October, and we know that the 31st of this month, Halloween, is a long recognized and practiced ritualistic day for this cabal. It's essentially like a Luciferian feast day. And so part of this conflict that is worth keeping in mind is that the enemy we are fighting, they are at their heart, their core being, they are religious zealots. They view themselves as the literal sons of Satan and Lucifer. They teach their progeny, the ones that they don't consume, that in the very beginning, Adam and Eve were created by the Creator, and then Eve had a child with Adam, and Eve had a child with the serpent. And they consider themselves the bloodline of the serpent. So keeping that in mind, part of this war is about the timing, where they're going to be in their recognition of life, in how they live their lifestyles, so that we can maximize our damage and our effectiveness. I implore each of you to continue to have faith in disclosure very soon. Your vindication is so close, it's palpable and tasteful. A little bit of intel for you tonight. If you happen to be in California or up and down the west coast of the United States, you will be experiencing earthquakes beginning from a couple of days ago and likely moving through the next at least 7 to 10 days. These quakes should be anywhere between a 4 and a 7, and they are indicative of full-scale tunnel destruction. A big portion of this exercise, this operation mission that we've been a part of, that began way back in 2015, 2016 in its current form, a big portion of that was completed from 2017 to 2020, when we had the full backing of the U.S. executive and the reluctant but legally required cooperation with some of the U.S. government. Tunnels and dumbs and dens of trafficking and torture beneath places like China Lake and Lake Titicaca and other areas in the world were cleaned out. Children were saved, rescued. More than 3,500 children were rescued from underneath China Lake. And so now that we have spent a couple of years ensuring that these systems are cleaned out and drained of the victims and also the perpetrators, we are beginning their full-scale destruction. That is the same sort of thing that has been going on in the Baltic Sea now for a couple of weeks. We have had tunnel destruction in that area of the world. Those tunnels tie directly into the underground systems that cover all of Eastern Europe. So we are right now living through the literal physical destruction of their apparatus of evil. That physical destruction cannot stay covert and private endlessly. Many of you will recall just a very short time ago the explosions that were recorded near the FBI building in Washington, D.C. Those explosions, according to my particular connection and bent on everything were also destruction of underground tunnels in the city of Washington, D.C. If those tunnels are being destroyed, we are at that phase where the military feels confident that no more usefulness can be gained by having them around. In other words, there are no more combatants that we're going to find who will somehow who can return home. Um, there's no more intelligence and reconnaissance to be gained by having them there. Their destruction has been intent from the very beginning, but we want to make sure and use every bit of this plan and every resource that we have available at our disposal so that we make sure excuse me, I apologize tonight. I've my young one has shared a little bit of his throat stuff with me. I apologize. um, but we want to be sure that um, when we do destroy these systems, that there's nothing else that resourceful or useful that we could glean from having them. And so we are entering that phase. We've actually been in that phase now for a couple of months. So I guess with that, we're going to transition just a little bit into some encouragement, talk a little bit about where we're going to go from here and how we keep ourselves mission focused and comforted. It is important to remember, and this would apply to every soldier and intelligence officer and military general, as well as each of you out there. It is important to remember that this war is not simply about the peoples of the world versus the deep state. That is the physical manifestation of this war. But this war goes back thousands of years. The war that is playing out, that we are a part of, is a war between the almighty creator of everything, the endless love that sustains life everywhere in all of the realms for all of everything, versus its very antithesis, the evil one. The minions of the evil one have controlled this particular realm for thousands of years. We, as human beings and mankind, are created in the image and likeness of that source creator. Man is the only creature in the world that is endowed with the ability to select its emotions based on its environment. We are also the only life form in the world endowed with the ability to conjure organic, original creation that has not been seen before. If any of you out there have young children, you have no doubt experienced this when they combine words and phrases and tell stories that are grammatically correct, describing images that they couldn't have ever seen. And we can say, we can get into the discussion of past lives, we can get into the discussion of reincarnation, we can get into the discussion of soul shifting, all of which are possible through some of the evil magic that has been used by this cabal. And I know that sounds crazy, but they're occultists. At the end of the day, they do the ceremonies that they do. They do the things to these kids that they do because they need blood magic. And so they have leveraged certain energetic qualities of the realm that we live in, the electrical earth that we all live on. And they have weaponized it against us and against the loving God that we all represent. And so this war is about good versus evil. This war is about freedom versus enslavement. This war is about controlling the direction that mankind goes for a minimum of the next 500 to 700 years. I would contend with you that that period of time could even be up to 1,000 years. We, for the first time, are going to remake the earth in the image that it was supposed to have been made in. The fall from grace in the very beginning caused suffering that is untold. It truly couldn't be adequately described or put into words. I wouldn't even want to try. It would do nothing but cause each of you out there grief and upset. It's worth noting that this that our entire history has been one of difficulty because of these individuals that we are now taking and their ancestors before them that we're now taking down. And so knowing that, it makes it a little bit easier to step back and appreciate your place in this. Without you, none of this is possible. The awakening has to be far reaching enough and impactful and deep and meaningful enough to prevent humanity from toppling back down the behavioral scale into violence and carnage. Throughout history, our civilizations have been goaded and cajoled and thrust into vicious, horrible, emaciating conflicts with one another by the same group of individuals at the top playing both sides. The reason that this was possible is because we have never, not one time, controlled the origination and dissemination of information. We have never had the ability to use those quote official sources to back us up. We've never had the ability of relying on factual, documented, provable evidence because it was always hidden. We've never had the ability to break away from the financial system of control and torture because it was designed far back in the day by the Vatican and the Knights Templar to be impenetrable unless you were on the inside. And so, for the first time in history, we control the information. You are the information for those individuals who are still asleep. You will be the information for those individuals who wake up rapidly and unpleasantly and who desperately need your guidance. We, as Anons and digital soldiers, are going to be the red wave, if I may say so, one of the red waves that we should talk about as we go through this period of disclosure. You are so important. There's just no other way to say it. Without you, your friends, your family, the Patriot movement, the truth movement out there, each of you who have found family outside of your blood family and your social sphere, without you, none of this happens. This can't work. The reason that it can't work is because the MK Ultra programming and the mind control and fear-based programming that all of humanity has had thrust upon it since certainly all of our lives, but I would venture back more than 200 and 250 years. It is extremely hard to break away from that. Hard, real evidence helps, but you know as well as I do that sometimes you can have the piece of paper in your hand and your sleepers around you will just simply not believe. They are too afraid. And so this operation is about more than just the destruction of the deep state. It is about restoring the God-given mantle of confidence and regency that you were given. Our ancestor, all the way back to Adam and Eve, our ancestors, understood who they were. They understood their spiritual power. They understood that their spiritual bodies, which you could also call your quantum or energetic body, has real abilities that can affect this physical world. You have the ability to control and direct your energy. You have the ability to effect change. You have the ability to control directionality of consciousness. You have the ability to influence others. These are abilities that are not found in the animal kingdom except in very small, almost instinctive representations. This operation is about you. It's about all of us. It's about we the people. We the people are victorious in the end. And we're not going to be just victorious. We're going to be unbelievably and absurdly victorious. The justice publicly that many of you want to see is coming. The confessions that many of you want to see are coming. The connections that many of you want to see drawn by individuals in power are coming. The disclosures about things like 9/11 and the Kennedy assassination and the World Trade Center bombing of the early 90s, the Antarctic Treaty and the 56 nation travel ban, all of these are coming. Some of these truths will take a while to impress themselves upon the mass consciousness of the world. But other truths, because of geopolitical and kinetic events occurring in real time, they're going to have to be disclosed sooner rather than later and in a rapid way. And so understanding that with all of that comes the need for each of you to tap into that God-given confidence and to tap into that spiritual mantle that you've been gifted with and that you've been blessed with, and to use that place, that emotional place of power, peace, and righteousness to, how to say it, to help walk those sleepers from the darkness into the light. We're doing this for everyone. This is for the trolls. This is for the patriots. This is for the 21-year-old communist at the grocery store. This is for the 67-year-old war veteran who was crippled in Vietnam. This is for the 38-year-old war veteran who was crippled in Iraqi freedom. This is for all of the millions, hundreds of millions of human beings who have been just slaughtered by this awful, awful group, this power structure that has enslaved us financially, mentally, emotionally, just in every fashion possible. We're doing this to take all of that down and to provide that freedom for everyone. And so understand that this is an event-driven, fluid, dynamic, changing sometimes by the hour operation. There are many different contingencies that can happen for each specific milestone and rally point. One of you recently asked about rally points. A good example of some rally points that we've had in this process: the Supreme Court decision about the vaccinations, the Supreme Court's overturning and reversal of Roe Wade. These are rally points where we reconvene and we strategize based on the situation at hand and how circumstances may have fluctuated. We pause for just long enough to reread our map, take into account our overall mission goal, and accomplish our critical functions. And sometimes we have to reassess and redirect. When I stated to you recently about U.S. delays, it wasn't necessarily about delaying Red October or the midterm elections. It was more along the lines of military reevaluation happening in real time. Real Raw News reported on the 20th of October that a high-ranking official of the deep state intelligence community finally became convinced that their side was not going to win the war. And that individual defected to the United States military. That individual brought actionable intelligence. That's all that I know about it. The Real Raw News report is predominantly accurate, but I can corroborate that was real. That's true. When these sorts of things occur, there's always a channel by which we can take that information, that new occurrence, and incorporate it into the overall direction. But we have to take a moment, reevaluate, strategize appropriately so that we cover all of our bases and we put that actionable reconnaissance to good use. We're winning this war. We're absolutely winning this war. Each of you, all of us out there, are going to be very, very happy. Israel is coming on our radar now. We're starting to see the narrative prep for anti-Semitism and the Jewish state and things like that. I encourage each of you to look up the lineage of Ashkenazi Judaism and how that particular lineage was hijacked and bastardized by this cabal. The great irony with that is that it was hijacked and bastardized many, many hundreds of years ago. I believe it was in the 10th century, the 9th and 10th centuries, but I'd have to double check. But these individuals adopted this death cult religion, adopted that misnomer to avoid utter destruction at the hands of the Russian Tsar. It's like we're repeating history, but we're going to do it the right way. We are allowing them to destroy themselves for the sleepers to see. And as many of you can probably attest, that destruction has woken up either some of you or some of those in your sphere. They have looked at it and said, wait a minute, I voted for, maybe the Democrat Party in the United States, or maybe one of the, coalition parties in one of the other countries, expecting this. And not only did I not get that, but I got all of this other stuff that I am vehemently opposed to. And so those sorts of realizations drive that breakaway from that programming, which is what we need to move forward as a human species. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, strap in, have yourselves comfortable, do your very best day to day. I know that it's tough. I know that it's okay. I feel like that's insulting. I know that it is incredibly hard. I know that we are living a war. We are being mentally accosted basically every day. We are being psychologically attacked and, quite frankly, messed with. But some of that is necessary to create the fog of war needed to conduct these operations. It is important to look inward and find that peace during all of this. Be of good courage and keep the faith. We are headed in the right direction. We are doing so at the most rapid pace possible. Keep in mind that we're trying to impress upon the peoples of the world 3 to 4 decades worth of social change in basically a 2 to 5 year period. And that's not to say that we're going to wait 5 years and we're going to have to deal with Joe Biden until 2024. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we are attempting to reorient the direction of mankind in this earth, a process that would take at least 30 to 40 years. In an eighth of that time, this process is delicate. It is sensitive. There are casualties along the way. Unfortunately, that can't be helped because of the nature of the entrenchment and the system that we're battling. But the good news is that we are winning that at every possible conceivable level. We have plants in various arenas of business, finance, government, and law. We have sometimes it's not just plants. We have patriots. We have patriots in some of those arenas that have stepped up to the plate, agreed to do their part, and they're doing it. We have President Trump, President Putin conducting themselves with the highest manner of strength and confidence. We have seen President Putin, if I can use a term from some of the younger individuals who are, how to say this, I'm trying to be very delicate about identities. Some individuals that I supervise in my day-to-day life, they're much younger than me, but they use a term called flexing. I believe that the term is referencing the saying or doing something to assert a certain level of confidence. President Putin has essentially done only that at every interaction with the fake Joe Biden. I believe that's absolutely by design. It is necessary to instill and kindle and keep that patriotism hope going. And we have very good reason to hope. And so with that, everyone, I'm going to love you and leave you this evening. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon. If you're wondering about the world financial resets and things like that, I don't have a whole lot of actionable, information that I get from anything behind the scenes with that particular arena is played so close to the chest that I almost would say that I'm not really an expert to follow in that area. That being said, you can check out the video descriptions on the Rumble channel for just some basic recommendations that I have for first timers and beginners. But other than that, I hope that each of you stays safe and well, and that you've been preparing. Those preparations that you've made over the last year, they are going to come in handy. We're going to go through a short period of intense discomfort and public disclosure, which will lead us into what I believe to be the greatest life that we could live outside of being reunited with the Creator. And so, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience. I know it's been a long file tonight. We had a lot to talk about. Those of you out there who sent well wishes and positive mementos and thoughts and prayers and vibes and intentions and whatever else words you want to use, for my sick children, for my sick child. I have one child. Over the last 24 to 48 hours, it's very noticed, it's very appreciated, and I return that love to each of you. We are doing this for the next generation, our progeny. Many of us have lived most of our lives. Some of us have lived nearly all of our lives at this point. We are doing this so that the generations that come after us, those young ones that we love, that we have nurtured and have tried to bring up as compassionate, understanding, thoughtful human beings, we're doing this so they have a chance, a real chance, a fair chance at taking life by the horns, if I can use the term, and living it to the greatest extent and doing the greatest amount of good possible for this great world and all of the wonderful patriots and people out there who live in it. We are going to see an era of prosperity and peace for mankind. And I hope that each of you, before you rest your head this evening, I hope that you just sit in a moment of peacefulness and thankfulness about that. Love wins, God wins. Even though the war is already won, we still have to play out. We still have to play out those kinetic portions that have to happen, and we have been for a couple of years now at least. And so, with that, everyone, this is SGAnon. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and I can't wait to be back with you again soon. Be safe out there. I say again, if we lose comms, Patriots are in control. And if that were to happen, I would go out to my backyard, and I would suggest maybe to each of you to consider this. I would go out to my backyard. I would take my shoes off. I would walk around in the grass. I would appreciate the majesty of the sky, the trees, the clouds, the beauty, the raw, incomparable beauty of this earth. And I would rest in the comfort knowing that we are taking it back. Have a great evening, everyone. I'll be back with you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.